Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before we call our meeting to order this evening, we're going to invite Steve Bryant up from Brownstone Church. Steve, thanks for joining us tonight. Would you lead us in the invocation, sir? Thank you.
Would you join me? Lord, I thank you today for these wonderful men and women who make decisions that affect all of us. I thank you for the value that they bring to the city of Weatherford. I pray, Father, for the proceedings tonight. I pray that every decision that's made would be based on fact. I pray, Father, that you would bless their families. I pray that the opportunities that they have to make changes to Weatherford for the good would be implemented to this evening. And I thank you for it. I bless this proceeding in your name. Amen.
Thank you again for being here. This time I'll call the meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. and the August 11th regular City Council meeting of the City of Weatherford. It's now in session. We do have a quorum present, all members in attendance. Item 3 on the agenda is pledges of allegiance to the United States and Texas flags will be led this evening by Councilman Kevin Cleveland.
If you would stand and join me for the pledge of the U.S. and Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you for that, Mr. Cleveland. Item 4 on the agenda, items of community interest. Mr. Hotop, anything this evening?
I have none.
Council.
Got nothing.
Item 5 on the agenda, 5A, is consider approval of the minutes of the joint meeting and public hearing of the City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission held July 21st of 2020. We do have a motion for approval by Kevin Cleveland, second by Mayor Pro Tem Wilder. Any discussion on 5A before we call for a vote? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote this time. Please indicate yea or nay. Passes 5-0. Item 6 is consent agenda items. Council, it's listed 6A through 6F. Can we hear those as a pool, or does anybody want to split something out?
I'm good altogether.
I'm here to this group, 6A through 6F. There's a motion on the floor for approval as presented by Jeff Robinson. Councilman Cleveland has provided the second. Is there any discussion before we call for a vote on all of those? Hearing none, we'll vote on consent agenda items this time. Indicate yea or nay, please. Consent items pass 5-0. Item 7 on the agenda, 7A, or 7 is public hearings. 7A is hold a public hearing and consider approval of ordinance O2020-38 on the voluntary annexation of University Hills 2020, an approximate 10.74 acre tract of land situated in the T&P Railroad Company survey, abstract number 1447, Parker County, Texas, and being parts of those tracts conveyed to the Rosalind Aurora Lamb by deed recorded in volume 1562, page 1853 of the Real Records of Parker County, Texas. Welcome, Mr. Hotop.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. 2016, there was approximately 69 acres that was annexed by the City Council through a voluntary annexation request of the developer to put in a single-family subdivision off Northwest Rick Williamson. That single-family subdivision has about 104 lots in it, and so that's continuing to grow. The developers had an opportunity to purchase some additional property, approximately 10.74 acres, directly adjacent to that, and so he's submitted a petition for a voluntary annexation request for the adjacent properties there, which is the request before you today for the public hearing for that, and also for consideration of that ordinance. This is a little bit different process than what we'll go through on the next item as far as a two-step. The next item is a two-step process. This is a one-step process because it's directly adjacent to an existing subdivision with no public roads. You can have the public hearing and adopt the ordinance on the same night. So the recommendation is for adoption of the ordinance from staff.
Is there any questions for Mr. Hotop before we have a public hearing? Thank you, sir. This time we'll have a public hearing on item 7A. Is anybody here that would like to speak specifically on this item? Please come forward at this time. 7A. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing on 7A. Council, any questions for staff or discussion amongst ourselves? This is an action item. Mayor Pro Tem provides a motion for approval. Second by Matt Tiskus. Any discussion on 7A before we call for a vote? Hearing none, we'll vote at this time. Indicate yea or nay, please. 7A passes 5-0. 7B, hold a public hearing on the voluntary annexation of Wassam Ranch 2020, approximately 80.17 acres situated in and being a portion of the T&P Railroad Company survey, section number 99, abstract number 1446, J. Bradford survey, abstract number 1931, and the J. Woosley survey, abstract number 1641, Parker County, Texas, and being all that certain lot, tract, and parcel of land described by deed to Castlemont Homes recorded in document number 201822717, official records, Parker County, Texas. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. James Hotop, City of Weatherford. So the request is an 80.17 acre tract that's shown on the map in yellow, purple, and red, and it is a proposed single-family subdivision. This is the second public hearing. The first public hearing was hosted last night in this building, August 10th at 5:30 p.m. So this, because of the adjacency next to a public roadway, will require two public hearings. This satisfies that requirement. The reading of the ordinance would actually take place, if the council so chooses, on August 31st at 5:30. And other than that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Hotop before we have a public hearing? Thanks, sir. We'll have a public hearing on 7B at this time. If there's anybody who'd like to speak specifically on this item, please come forward one at a time. Yes, sir. Good to see you again.
First of all, I'd like to say thanks for the quick response for the questions last night.
You're welcome. Before you get started, we'll give you 3 minutes before you get going, if we can have your name and address again for the record.
Michael Yarborough,
Good to see you again, Mr. Yarborough.
2558 Green Branch Road, Weatherford, Texas. Okay, it's my opinion and understanding that the city council is the sole voting authority on the annexation of the 80 plus acres, and also the sole authority voting on the extension of the ETJ boundary. Is that correct, yes or no?
Mr. Hotop, can you address that?
So the consideration of the city council is just for the annexation. The projection of the ETJ line is created by statute of the state of Texas. The council does not have any authority to change that projection at all.
So the council does not vote on that extension of the ETJ.
That is correct.
Okay. Learn something every time. Okay. Been digging into some of this, and what I see is I would like to understand what documentation there is available to those of us that shows that you complied completely with all the statute written in Chapter 43. In particular, reference to 43.0561, lowercase e 3 and 4, which talks about a brief statement of why you want to extend this boundary.
Mr. Hotop, I'd love for you to answer that.
Sorry about
Let me add a little to it. Is there in-house city documentation, procedures, checklists, those kind of things that make sure you've done your job into qualifying and being in line with what this Chapter 43 says?
That's a very good question. So we've prepared all paperwork in accordance with what's required from the state.
I'd like to see that myself. Okay. Also, also I'd like to know what is the benefit that you, the city, sees by extending that boundary to yourself. What is the benefit? And I don't want a rewrite of human health or human safety, those kind of things. That's in the statute. And also, what is the benefit to our landowners, that boundary is going to now encompass? What's the benefit of that? What is the protection you're going to give us? I think I know some of the answers, but I want to hear them from you.
We've got 30 seconds left for the speaker.
Yeah, so great question. So the ETJ is, again, a projection of the corporate city limit lines, so that's created by statute. It's not something that this body up here decides or chooses on. So that's simply projected as a result of annexation.
But in that requirement, it requires you to make a brief statement of why you're doing it. So go back and look at it.
Okay.
Also, what was the date of the last position that was exercised in terms of where the ETJ currently exists? That's all I have.
Okay. Appreciate you being here, Mr. Yarborough.
Thank you.
Do you want to answer anything else, or we?
We'll be happy to get the information he's requested. The city secretary obviously has worked on the annexation
Absolutely.
document. So
Thank you, Mr. Hilltop. Mr. Yarbrough, thank you, sir. Anybody else on 7B? Anybody else from the floor? Hearing none at this time, we will close the public hearing on 7B. Council, any discussion or questions for staff? There's no action needed on this item. Am I correct on that, Mr. Hilltop?
you are correct, no
Okay,
action.
we will move to item 7C. Hold a public hearing to consider a request for a zoning district change from unzoned ETJ to the City of Weatherford zoning RE residential estate for the Wassam Ranch Phase 2 subdivision, a 22.48 acre tract located on Oak Bend Trail adjacent to Wassam Ranch Phase 1, City of Weatherford, Parker County, Texas, ZCH 2020-0010. Good evening, Mr. Kettner.
Yes, you have before you this request that went before the Planning and Zoning Commission at their July 22nd, 2020 meeting in regards to the rezoning of the requested property, which is was just spoken about and is in the annexation process. This process will require this item to be continued to a date and time certain. And in the staff report, we originally stated September 8th, 2020 as a regular scheduled meeting, but as the annexation is scheduled for August 31st, 2020 at 5:30, and to assist the developers in their process, we would amend and recommend that the date of approval based on the staff report, the unanimous approval of the Planning Commission with all five present and one abstention of approval, and staff's recommendation of approval of the rezoning request be continued to the August 31st, 2020 meeting.
Any questions for Mr. Kettner on 7C? We have to have a public hearing on this item too. Great, thank you. This time we'll open up public hearing on item 7C. Anybody would like to speak on this item specifically, please come forward this time. Public hearing. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing on item 7C. Council staff is recommending approval, recommends tabling until August 31st versus September 8th. If that's your pleasure, Councilman Cleveland.
Make a motion to table this item to August 31st, 2020, scheduled city council meeting.
Motion on the floor, Mayor Pro Tem, do you duplicate?
Yes, sir.
Okay, any discussion before we call for a vote on 7C? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote this time. Okay, 7C is tabled until 8/31/2020. Item 8, regular agenda items, 8A, and that was 5-0, excuse me. 8A is consider request for final plat approval for Wassam Ranch Phase 2, 18 lots on 22.48 acres, located on Oak Bend Trail adjacent to Wassam Ranch Phase 1, City of Weatherford, Parker County, Texas, SBD 2020-0035. Mr. Kettner.
Mayor and council, you have in your packet the complete staff report outlining this request for a subdivision of property that is contingent upon the annexation of the property, which is included in the complete staff report, which has 10 conditions and 2 additional that were placed on it by the Planning Commission at their July 22nd, 2020 meeting. This action may be taken on this to approve this request with these 12 total conditions subject to annexation.
Any questions for Mr. Kettner on 8A? Entertain a motion this time, if it's your pleasure.
I'll make a motion that we approve the final plat contingent on the annexation and the 12 conditions.
So moved.
Motion by Jeff Robinson stated, duplicated, so moved by Matt Tiskus. Any discussion on 8A before we call for a vote? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote this time on 8A. Indicate yea or nay, please. 8A is approved 5-0. 8B, consider request to authorize an exception for the sale of alcohol at 901 South Main Street, a location less than 300 feet, property line to property line from the Weatherford ISD property.
901 South Main's existing convenience store known as Sam's Mini Mart. So the property owners requested an exception to the distance requirement from TABC. So the distance measures approximately from the adjacent school property, which is where the WISD maintenance facility, approximately 180 feet. From door to door, from property line to the front door is approximately 258 feet. The school district has provided a letter saying they're not in opposition to the sale of alcohol at this particular facility, and I believe the applicant is here to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Hotop, just for the record to clarify, the WSD did not oppose this item at all,
That is correct.
And that's documented.
That's included in the packet, yes,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you. Any questions for staff on 8B as presented? Mayor Pro Tem.
I tried to make sure I was looking at the right piece. The maintenance shed, is that the shed that's located on the west side of the, where the gates go in?
So it's going to be on the east side, so
It's on
it'll be east of South Main, so it's directly adjacent to the stadium is where that's going to be. So the west side of the stadium, yes, ma'am, that's it.
I would call that building behind where the store is going to be.
Yeah.
So it's probably closer to the Taco Casa facility there, so it's directly adjacent across the street from that. It's an existing metal building there. So no kids are in school at that facility. Obviously, it's just a extracurricular facility there that's within that distance requirement in a maintenance building.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions?
Did the business change ownership, or?
We do have the applicant here that's asked to come forward.
Oh, okay.
So it is proposed for sale, and so the applicant, I believe, in that, and the gentleman that's here can speak to that, but I believe the new proposed owner is interested in being able to sell package beer and wine there. So
Okay.
we'll let him comment on that.
Okay.
Sorry for not asking that for dismissed. At this time, Mr. Ryan Hughes, is it Hughes, sir? Yes, sir. Okay. Ryan, welcome, and thanks for your patience. Once you get settled, if you can let us have your name and address, and then if we can speak within 3 minutes, we'd sure appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
My name's Ryan Hughes, address 2225 East Randall Mill Road, Arlington, Texas. So I represent the applicant who is interested in purchasing the property. We ask that you grant a variance to the alcohol distance ordinance that the city of Weatherford has passed for this situation because it is within 300 foot of the property line of the maintenance facility, not the school nearby. Its Google Maps shows it to be about 0.2 miles from the school, which is well over the 300 foot. This is, the permit that he's seeking is for off-premise consumption, so it's not a bar, it's just selling alcohol to go. And we just ask that you grant this variance so that the business isn't foreclosed on and that, the business can operate and flourish. The applicant, he owns just under a dozen McDonald's franchises as well as some other gas stations, and I can tell you that he comes into these places and cleans them up. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Hughes? You answered my question. We're looking for community partners, and you've answered that this owner that's going to attempt to purchase this or this is going to be a community partner. And that's exactly, I think, what we're looking for. So, questions, comments? Thank you for your willingness to answer our questions and for coming over tonight.
Thanks.
Questions for staff?
I have a couple newbie questions maybe for staff. I'm looking back at the history of this issue in the city. I see some yes votes and some no votes, and I don't know, Mr. Hotop, if you're able to comment, but do we have a best interest standard for when a variance can be granted, or how do we make these decisions?
So the three that are shown in the staff report there, one, Film Alley, faces away from Austin Elementary School. So they do sell beer and wine in that facility there because part of it's a restaurant that serves the movie theater. So the other Sam's Mini Mart, coincidentally enough, 1125 North Main, directly adjacent to New Hope Baptist Church. But during that presentation of the applicant, what the applicant indicated is they had the ability to meet. So churches are a little bit different than schools because you measure door to door as opposed to property line to property line.
Okay.
But during that presentation, the applicant indicated that he was only a few feet short of the 300-foot distance, so he could simply move the door to meet the requirement. And so as opposed to placing the financial burden on the applicant at that point, the council elected to allow that one to happen because it was simply just an exercise. If it was voted down, then he would have moved the door 15 feet and met the distance requirement.
Okay.
The more recent one is 705 North Main, which is North Main Church of Christ, and that did come before the council, and the council ultimately decided that that wasn't in the best interest of the community, to be able to sell alcohol there. Part of the reason is that the front door for that facility directly faced that convenience store there. It used to be Vic's Chevron is what it was called when it was previously in operation. And so it was just the look and feel just wasn't right for the community, being able to come straight out of church and see the package store there. And so the council ultimately decided at that point that that wasn't in the best interest of the community, so.
Those are excellent questions, and that's great. I want you to get those answers, and the community needs to learn a bit more about how the historical, the basis of the decision has been made over the years. So any other questions? Those are great.
I could just share with Matt my thought process. I was here for the church deal, and to me, it's about
Which church deal?
the North Main Church of
The
God
North Main,
and
okay,
Vic's, is it Vic's, right, on North Main?
Yes, sir.
And that was the difference of the neighbor, that allowing to sell alcohol was a negotiation between school districts and churches. Not everybody wanted alcohol sales. But when the neighbor's okay with it, the one that was in opposition is okay, that speaks volumes to me. So with the school district writing a letter saying this is not a adverse position to be in, that makes me comfortable, whereas the church did not feel comfortable.
Thanks for that, Mr. Cleveland. Any other questions, Mr. Tiskus? Those are good ones. Mayor Pro Tem, anything?
And
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Just a clarification, that they didn't, the school district letter doesn't state they're in favor of, they just
No,
say
it's just not in
they're not
opposition.
opposing it.
Can,
That's correct. Yeah.
can they change their mind at a later date?
I think, yes, they could submit something at a later date, but the action is before
already
the council
done.
tonight, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem.
So do you know, there are no school children that go, that facility surrounds, if I'm not mistaken, it surrounds the area that's the field. So there's no opposition to children being in or around or near the sale of alcohol
So
here?
I can't begin to try to explain if there's any opposition to it by any of the parents or anything like that. This is simply, and the letter as it's stated, and I'll read it to you. I'll get a second to pull it up, excuse me. This letter is to serve as notification to you that Weatherford ISD has no plans to object or oppose your application to the TABC sale of alcohol with the mini mart located within 300 feet of the district's maintenance facility. And that's signed from the superintendent of schools, so.
My concern is, I guess, that I drive down there quite a bit, and children are in, around, and everywhere, and I understand the cash flow issue. It's just, my main thought is the children. I have concerns with that.
The ninth grader is 14 or 15?
Generally 14, 15,
Okay,
yes, sir.
okay. Okay, that's good comments. Any other discussion or comments? Anything from Mr. Hotop?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Council, conversations, thoughts, opinions? Okay.
I'll just put my I understand the letter from the school district. I'm just not a fan of that. So that's just where I stand on that issue.
Sure. Anybody else?
Well, the thing I would say is that if this was a school facility that had kids in it, this is adult workers that do maintenance, and this is where they park their equipment. So, I think we could find several places around town where churches and schools are closer than this, that it's completely legal. And being that this is school-owned versus a school, to me, is a very differentiating point. School-owned for the purpose of parking vehicles and equipment is not the same as a place where we have the education of kids going on, so.
So, Mr. Cleveland, any thoughts?
No, I would agree with Jeff completely.
Okay. This is an action item. If that's your pleasure, council.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion on the floor for approval by Kevin Cleveland. Is there a second? Jeff Robinson has provided that. Council, another opportunity for discussion or final thoughts before we call for a vote. We'll call for a vote this time on 8B. Please indicate yea or nay. 8B passes 3-2. 8C is vote to propose the City of Weatherford property tax rate for fiscal year 2021. Good afternoon or good evening. Stas? I didn't do it. I hadn't hit any buttons. For once, it wasn't me.
There we go. Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Jessica Doss, Finance Director. As your agenda says, we will be asking council to propose a property tax rate for the fiscal year of 2021. The language here is a little misleading, so I'm going to take a few slides to walk you through what we're going to be asking you to vote on tonight. So the state of Texas passed a law known as Truth in Taxation. This law aims to make the tax rate setting process clear and concise for the citizens by requiring any taxing entity to follow specific steps showing what tax rates are being considered and what the effect the rate has on our overall budget. So the process is kicked off once we receive our final assessed values, which tell us how much the total value of all taxable property within the city has changed. This information is then used by the appraisal district to calculate our tax rates. Those rates are then published in the local newspaper. At that point, the City Council votes to propose a tax rate for the upcoming fiscal year. This is not to be confused with adopting a tax rate. Rather, it lets citizens know the maximum rate Council will consider adopting for the next year. In effect, tonight's vote will set a cap on the tax rate set. We then publish the results of that vote and hold 1 or 2 public hearings, depending on the tax rate proposed. At the end of that process, Council must vote to adopt a tax rate. That vote is what sets the tax rate in place for 1 year. So a new Senate bill was passed and went into effect January 1st of this year. This bill essentially changes the calculations of the tax rates and the process in which a city adopts a tax rate. To start off, let's talk about what most of us know as the effective rate. Under Senate Bill 2, the terminology of this rate is now no new revenue tax rate. The calculation of the rate has not changed, just the terminology. The other tax rate that's in play is what most of us know as the rollback tax rate. This tax rate is now referred to as the voter-approved tax rate. Now, there were some changes to the calculation of this rate. Prior to Senate Bill 2, this rate was calculated by adding 8% to the M&O portion of the no new revenue tax rate, or the old effective rate, essentially putting an 8% cap on the tax rate. What Senate Bill 2 did was change that cap to only 3.5%. If the city chooses to adopt a tax rate that exceeds the 3.5% cap, Senate Bill 2 requires a city to hold an automatic election on the November ballot. However, if a city adopts a tax rate less than the 3.5% cap, the city may bank the unused increment portion for a rolling 3 years. For example, if a city adopts the no new revenue tax rate, this gives them the ability to use all or a portion of that 3.5% for the next 3 years. Therefore, the city now has a cap of the 7% without holding an automatic election. So the two rates can be thought of as benchmarks. The no new revenue tax rate tells you what tax rate you would need to levy on properties that were on the tax roll for both years to yield the equal amount of revenue. On a high level, the key component here is how your property values have changed from year to year. So let's take a look at what Weatherford's tax rates are doing. Parker County Appraisal District determined that overall values actually increased 6% from last year. While this number looks good, there was $42 million added to the taxable value that stemmed from annexations that took place in 2019, and some adjustments were made to the 2019 taxable value. Looking at the property values that were on the certified roll for 2019 and 20, those property values actually decreased by 0.8%. So our no new revenue tax rate is actually higher than our current rate by 81 cents or 1.6%. While this increase would add a substantial amount to our reserves and fund balance, this increase is not needed at this time to balance our budget. Therefore, the FY21 proposed budget is based on a tax rate of 48.29 cents per $100 of assessed value, a decrease of 1% from our current rate and 2.6% decrease from the no new revenue tax rate. So if we were to approve the rate that the proposed budget is built on, which is the bottom row on your screen, we would increase our general fund revenue by $660,000. And the property owners would see a decrease of $5 per $100,000 valuation on their tax bill. If we were to leave the rate at 48.79 cents, which is our current rate, we would add an additional $140,000 to our revenue, which as the budget sits now, would go straight to fund balance. Again, per state law, we need to hold a vote to propose a tax rate. I want to continue to stress that this vote does not obligate council to pass the proposed rate. All this vote does is serve to set a cap on the property tax rate that we can ultimately adopt next year, or next month. I would like to mention that the language used in the motion that council makes tonight must include the specific tax rate being proposed. So I've included the language on the screen for your reference.
Any questions? I want to tell you that the timeline, that first slide, is so helpful. It's a complicated process, even to people that see it year after year. And so thank you for that and for your efforts and try to educate our customers on what this process is and how many steps are involved to give them an opportunity to participate.
Would you back up one slide for just a second?
Yes, this one?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Sure.
You can go forward. I'm good. I just wanted to verify in my mind something like that.
Any other questions related to the item? Okay. Council, this is an action item. I believe that the verbiage for the motion is on your screen, if it's your pleasure, or we can have discussion.
I'll make a motion to propose, whoa, could you put that back?
I can't, thank you.
There you go. Gotcha.
I'll make a motion to propose a tax rate of 48.79, is that the current?
That's the current rate.
Cents per 100 evaluation for the fiscal year 2021 budget.
Motion on the floor by the Mayor Pro Tem. Is there a second? There is not a second on the motion. Motion dies.
Can I give an explanation?
Please
as to
do,
why?
yes.
We're not setting a tax rate tonight.
And the reason I didn't know if between a first and a second, procedure-wise, if we could, so my bad. Go ahead.
The reason I made that motion is because we're not setting a tax rate tonight. It's a zero value, and there is an opportunity in the budget that I feel that we have an opportunity to future plan for some of assets in our community, and I wanted to have the opportunity to have a work session on that budget and propose that idea. So I made a motion that would be the highest. Obviously, it would allow us the discussion opportunity.
Okay. The basis of the motion is to discuss possible future
I will
opportunities.
say, Heidi, that with the proposed budget of 48.29, that's probably the direction I was headed. But if you have conversation that you would like to have further on past this, I'd be willing to at least hear down the line, and 48.79 is not going to be a set in stone. We still are probably going to end up back at 48.29, but I would still, if you have ideas, I'd like to hear them. I'd like to at least be talked about. I don't want to shut it off if you've got thoughts. I would second the motion for 48.79 with the understanding that if you can validate what that benefit is to us, that it's something we would
Okay,
consider.
so you hit the motion button again. Let's.
Could I say something?
Absolutely, Mr. Robinson.
Well, just to speak to what Heidi has said, I definitely understand. I guess the reason I'm a little more sensitive to it is just because of what's going on in the pandemic and what it has done financially to a lot of people. Anything that we do and the way it may be interpreted in the press or whatever, that we've got an opportunity to lower taxes, there's a lot of people struggling out there, and that's the only reason that I hesitated to second, because I do understand that what we propose tonight is not what we necessarily will adopt, so.
Good point. Mr. Tiskus, any comments on
Yeah,
that?
I'm on board with that, just looking at it, and I know we're not making a decision tonight, so I want to be open to the discussion, but I'm going to have a very difficult time not voting for the .29 rate for the reasons that Jeff said. I think just a lot of people are hurting, and we need to be mindful of that in any way we can, so that's why I didn't move to.
Sure.
to make
Thanks for
that
the clarification on that. I think, Mayor Pro Tem, what you need to know is all of us support the mental pathway that you're on.
Yeah.
And I think want you to hear that and know that, and now that we understand better, and thanks for clarifying that.
Just for the opportunity for conversation.
If we don't do this, we
about
can't
our
have a
future.
discussion about it.
Right, that's true.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Well stated, I'm glad you followed up on that. Thank you, everybody, for the
And
feedback.
I back up what both of them say, I'm on the same side, but I want to hear what you have to say and give you a chance to share your thoughts, so.
And, if now's not the time for that, it doesn't mean that it won't be ever. And so we just need to have a discussion as a team, and to be honest with you, that's what this community expects us to do, is have these discussions about these items. Is there an opportunity? Is there an opportunity that we take now? So thanks for sticking to your guns. There's a motion on the floor by the Mayor Pro Tem, and there's a second by Kevin Cleveland. And for the record, will you state the rate again, Mayor Pro Tem?
48.79.
Okay, all righty. Any discussion on the item before we call for a vote? We'll call for a vote on 8C at this time. Indicate yea or nay, please. Passes 5-0. 8D, presentation of the quarterly financial report for quarter 3 of fiscal year 20 and the city manager's fiscal year 21 proposed budget. Welcome back.
There we go. Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Jessica Doss, Finance Director. Before we go into the FY21 proposed budget, I'd like to go through the financial report for the third quarter of FY20. Through June, the general fund has collected 77% of our budgeted revenue and spent only 70% of our budgeted expenditures, creating a surplus of just under $1.7 million. With a few larger expenses remaining for Q4 and all of our property tax revenue already collected, we will eat up most of the surplus before the year end. Through the third quarter, our revenues are falling about in line with how we would have expected. We have received 101% of our property taxes and 67% of our sales tax. However, that only includes 8 months of collections. The majority of the revenue classified under other taxes is based on quarterly billing, which we've only received through Q2. We have been keeping a close eye on sales tax figures over the last few months, as we were unsure how the pandemic would affect our local economy. We saw a slight decrease in our sales tax revenue from prior year in April, but May collections made up for that shortfall and more. We saw a 14% year-over-year increase for May collections, which is a great representation of our strong economy and stability. Sales tax revenue is up 7% from last year. On a dollar basis, we are up $615,000 from last year and about $466,000 from where we budgeted to be through the third quarter. On the expenditure side, we are tracking on target with 70% of our annual budget spent, but we do still have about $1.1 million in non-recurring items and about $6.6 million in personnel expenses for the remainder of the year. Moving on to a few of our other funds, our solid waste fund is running a deficit through June, with 65% of our revenue received and 70% of our expenditure spent. We have only received about 8 months of our royalty revenue, but we are projecting our royalty revenue to come in about $150,000 below budget. And last, our hotel motel fund is running a deficit of about $99,000 through the third quarter. Through May collections, our hotel occupancy tax payments are down $124,000 or 18% year over year. The hotel tax payments follow the same schedule as the sales tax, so we are 2 months behind. Unlike sales tax, the hotel tax did take a pretty substantial hit due to COVID. For April and May collections combined, we've collected $167,000 less in April and May of 2020 than April and May of 2019. So at this time, I'll take any comments or questions that you have on the financial report before moving on to the budget.
Questions from Ms. Dawes, Mayor Pro Tem?
I have one question. It's been said to me that there's a philosophy out there that they believe sales tax has increased because people are buying more locally because we're all home more. So do you see sales tax remaining where we have the base and then the overages going to capital? Do you see that trend still continuing?
I would hope so, that everybody continues to shop local. So yeah, we've kind of based our trend on what we have been seeing.
Okay, and so have we maintained the $10 million base rate for our base sales tax?
10 million.
Our base that goes into O&M,
Yes.
that's still 10 million?
I believe.
I believe Councilwoman Wilder is speaking of just how we base the baseline amount of sales tax that goes into the budget versus goes into one time. So it's a little bit more than 10 million. You know, it's the 4-year average.
Yes, the 4-year average, I believe, I'm sorry, the 4-year average is, I believe, closer to about 14 million.
Okay, so that has raised the base into O&M.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're about 14 million for the 4-year average.
Okay, that's what I was wanting to know. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that response. Any other questions? Anybody? No actions required at this time. It's for information only, council. If we don't have any other questions, we'll move on. Thank you for your willingness to come forward. Good to see you again.
I'll keep going on the budget. I'll keep going on the budget.
Sorry.
Do you want to?
My bad.
No, you're done.
I mean, I can sit down.
Hey, I'm just thanking you for the first half, and welcome back, and let's
You're
go and
welcome
talk
for
about
that
the
first
budget.
step. I'd like to begin by saying a quick thank you to everyone that has spent time on this budget. A lot of hard work and collaboration among all the departments has gone into this proposed budget. So the budget proposal builds on the momentum from last year and expands in some high priority areas. First and foremost, our budget is balanced with all service levels continuing at the current capacity. As always, we keep an eye on risks and opportunities on the horizon through maintaining our fund balance at 120 days and conservatively managing our sales tax receipts. We are continuing renovations of some facilities, such as the library and Fire Station 1, and continuing our step grade program for employees. Staff is also pretty excited about the major focuses for next year and beyond. This budget continues to reserve the $750,000 for capital projects and funding for the downtown project. In total, our FY21 budget encompasses $63.8 million. It includes 23 different funds, 17 different departments, and 316 part-time and full-time employees. This budget includes every city program except for electric, water, and wastewater, which can be found in a separate budget document. But today we'll be spending most of our time on our general fund. So as we just talked about, property tax is always a focal point for our budget discussions, and it represents the second largest revenue source that we have. The new property that was added to our assessed value this year yields us an additional 2.6% in revenue over last year. As we just mentioned, our current rate is 48.79 cents, and our FY21 proposed budget is based on a rate of 48.29 cents, a decrease of 1.02%. Weatherford's property tax rate is lower than the average mid-cities rate, lower than the state average, and lower than the average city tax rate in Parker County. We were able to do this through a diverse revenue stream and really strong fiscal management. So in total, for the general fund, we project to receive $39.4 million in revenues and spend $40.3 million in expenses, decreasing our fund balance by $853,000. We are budgeted to end at 142.52 days of working capital. On an ongoing basis, we are balanced with a surplus of $79,000. Of our $14.7 million fund balance, 84% is tied up in the 120-day council preferred reserve. The comp absences reserve makes up about 4%, leaving 12% or $1.8 million unreserved and available if needed. So the above chart represents our revenue breakdown for our FY21 budget. As we saw with previous years, our largest sources of revenue by far are sales tax, followed by property tax. There isn't a lot of change in this landscape from last year. We are budgeting a 2% increase in sales tax from our FY20 projection numbers, which is a little bit more conservative than what we've seen in the past. As far as expenditure breakdown, the vast majority of our budget is taken up by personnel costs. This is basically the case with any governmental organization, and it will continue to be the case for us. Contractual services comes in our second highest cost category, followed by supplies and then capital. The above graph breaks out our total general fund expenditures by department. This percent breakdown tends to be pretty consistent year to year. Because the majority of our budget is based on, or is made up of personnel, the total expenditure breakdown tends to mirror our personnel breakdown, with the largest areas being police and fire. Overall, this is a similar breakdown as last year. All your supplemental packages are detailed in your books, but I'll go ahead and go through the major ones today. In total, we're requesting $2.5 million in supplemental packages, with $1.8 million of those being non-recurring. Like I said, these are all detailed in your books, along with the requests that were made but were not funded. So we're requesting to fund 8 police vehicles out of our fleet replacement fund and purchase 3 replacement work trucks for our Transportation and Public Works Department from the general fund. The facilities category includes funding for a new shade pavilion at the library that is funded by the Library Special Revenue Fund. And it also includes the purchase of a new utility building to be used by TPW, facilities maintenance, and sanitation. We are seeing a larger increase in our software maintenance expense, which makes up the majority of our ongoing technology requests. Under technology, we have also included funding for an upgrade or change to our Track It software. Under contractual services, we are continuing to see the cost of mowing and general street services increase. And under supplies, we've included some increases to maintenance for our fleet, the purchase of rescue tools and equipment for our fire department, traffic calming devices, and some funds to expand our special events, such as Monster Bash and Holiday in the Park. So what's next? On August 25th, we will be asking for direction for the grant funding requests that are in the back of your book, and we'll also have a budget work session. At the first meeting in September, we will have 2 public hearings, one on the tax rate and one on the budget in general. And then on September 22nd, we plan on adopting the FY21 budget and adopting a tax rate for the next year. So today was just a high-level overview of the FY21 budget. Please reach out to me anytime with any questions or comments as you go through your book. At this time, I'll open the floor for any comments or questions you have at this time.
Any questions or comments?
I got 2 real quick. Number 1, could you make sure and forward copies of your presentations to me?
Yes.
So that I can go back through them
Sure.
later? Okay.
If you're going to forward that,
Yeah,
I'll forward them to
send it to all
everybody.
of us, yeah.
all of us, and I don't think you had fire in there.
I don't have what?
Every other line, the line was there, but it just,
Oh,
The heading
it
was-
just didn't say fire?
The one I'll
Okay.
send you, it'll have it on.
Yeah. Formatting deal and the switch,
Yeah.
yeah.
I just want to make sure I was seeing what I was seeing.
It's police and then fire.
And I wanted to clarify something that just come up, and it might, once I dive in here, make more sense. But on fleet replacement, it was listed as one-time payments. I understand buying a piece of equipment is one time, but it's my understanding that the fleet program, it actually goes into an ongoing because you fund that going forward. Is that still correct? Are we still functioning that? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So in theory,
The
it's a
ongoing portion is like 1/5. If it's a 5-year vehicle, it's just 1/5.
1/5 of that. So it says 0 in the ongoing. Buying a piece of equipment does create an ongoing expense though, but it's to replace that piece.
Yes, the ongoing expense is part of the department budget.
Okay, just make sure we're still functioning.
Great questions, great feedback. Anything else? Now I know you're finished, and I want to tell you how much we appreciate it. It's a lot of information. You do a good
Yes, thank you.
job of
Yeah, great job.
Thank you.
giving us the relevant stuff, so thank you so much. No action required on 8D, council. We're going to move on to item 9, which is future agenda items. Anybody? Mr. O'Top.
Just the work session that was requested, that Councilwoman Wilder requested, will just be incorporated into the normal work session that was already scheduled for August 25th. So
Okay.
we'll just add that as part of the discussion at that point.
Mayor Pro Tem, you okay with that? All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for your quick response on that, sir. Anybody else? Okay, we'll go to item 10, citizen comments on non-agenda items. Anybody in the audience has a comment on a non-agenda item this evening? If you do, please come forward this time. Hearing none, item 11 on the agenda is adjournment. Kevin Cleveland with a motion for adjournment, second by Mayor Pro Tem Wilder. Any discussion? I know the answer to that's no. We'll call for a vote when the city secretary is ready. Indicate yea or nay, please. Council's adjourned unanimously 5-0 at 7:18 p.m. Thank you all for your service.